Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the New Mainstream podcast,
where we explore the impact of multicultural consumers on marketing and media.
I'm your host, Mario Carrasco, and co-founder of Think Now. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the New Mainstream podcast. Excited to talk to our guest today, Glory Alcántara, Director of Multicultural Marketing at General Mills. Glory, so happy to have you join us today.
Hi, Mario. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Now, remind me, before we dive in, you're in Miami, right?
I am, yes.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So you're finishing up a recording on a Friday, so you're almost at the weekend.
Yeah, this is a great way to end the week.
Yeah,
Talking about one of
looking
my favorite
forward.
topics ever.
Awesome. So before we dive in, I know you've been busy and doing a lot at General Mills this past month. Um, we rescheduled a couple of times, and I've been busy as well, which is a good thing for our industry. But one of my favorite parts about the show is learning about how people ended up in our arena in multicultural marketing and research. So tell us a little bit. Were you one of those people that kind of always knew that you wanted to be in marketing, or did your path take some twists and turns?
Yeah, I would say my career journey has been anything but linear. I'll start with where I come from. I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic, and I moved to the US at 17 to go to undergrad to a small school in Wisconsin. And then I started actually working after that at Kimberly Clark in R&D for a few years, which was an amazing experience. But it was there that I started to discover this passion I had for marketing. I was in the room when a lot of the marketers came to present innovation plans and growth plans, and I was like, oh my god, I love that job. So I actually job shadowed a lady that I was friends with, and I was like, can I just watch you for a day and like go to your meetings? I want to know what you do because I might actually explore a career switch. And she obviously was very graceful and said, yeah, about, and I just job shadowed her for like a day. And I was like, that's it. I really want to do this. Then I started my journey too, because I knew a lot of the CPG companies, they want their marketers to come from MBA programs. So I knew my next step was to get an MBA. So I went to Indiana University to get my MBA, which is an amazing experience. And from there, General Mills recruited me. And it's important for me to say this part because when I came out of my MBA program, I had a couple offers at other companies, and I purposely chose GMI, General Mills, for many reasons. But one of them was for the quality and the amazing set of brands that are housed under the General Mills, roof. So for me, that was like, okay, if I'm gonna learn how to do marketing, let me go to one of the best, if not the best, in my opinion, out there in terms of branding and how you take care of a brand, how you grow a brand. So that's how my career started before. And then once I was at Mills, I've been really fortunate to have such amazing people, leaders in the organization who believe in me, who have given me differential opportunities that have shaped who I am. And hopefully that's part of the reasons why I think I was, the right fit for the role that I have today. So I started in marketing, in brand in Minneapolis, right out of business school. I did a few years there. I also spent some time in Latin America, leading some of our brands from the U.S. that we take into some of those countries, like Brazil, Argentina, Peru, Chile, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Panama, Trinidad. So many countries. I got to spend so much time in the markets, learning how our beloved brands from the U.S. are adapted or are promoted and marketed in those markets where people don't even know about them. I spent a few years there and then came back to North America retail, which is the North America business. And I spent a few years there doing a role that is really interesting. It's a startup, basically. It's a startup company role. So it's a co-founder role. We have like incubator companies within General Mills that are investing in like high growth, opportunity areas. So I spent a few years there. And then after that role came the opportunity came for me to have this role, and it's been about a year and change, and I've been just loving every day of my role. It has been an amazing journey. I think everything I have done in the past and even my upbringing has given me so many tools that I'm now able to employ, day in and day out as I continue to work with all the leaders in the company and the teams to help advance how, our brands are going to connect deeply with the ever growing Hispanic consumer in the US.
That's incredible. And I love, one of the things I love about our industry, marketing insights, is that your personal experiences shape, and I would say the more of those experiences you have, like your journey, Dominican Republic to Wisconsin to visiting Latin America, and all those experiences help you become a better marketer. And I just love that about our industry.
Yeah, it allows you to have a really different, diverse, culturally complex, I think, view of the world. That then when you come in and you're able to bring those perspectives into one, a company that values those perspectives, but two, that you're allowed to use those, diverse perspectives to shape the future of these brands, I think it's beautiful. So it's definitely has served me well to have had those experiences in the background that I have to be able to, now come get to work in some of the biggest brands in households today.
Yeah, and that I think that's a great segue to what I want to talk about more about General Mills. And like you mentioned, one of the reasons you wanted to work at General Mills, such an iconic company, iconic brands that I'm sure you knew since before. That's a global brand, right? That so many of us grew up with. And I'm curious, how does General Mills approach engaging with multicultural consumers? Like, I guess, and I would love to know how when you got there, what was the approach, and how have you shaped or evolved that approach during your time and tenure at General Mills?
Yeah, before jumping into the answer, I'll just kind of take a little step back and say
Yes.
General Mills has been out there, has been, in the market for over 155 years. So that's the history of this company. And, brands that are so huge, right? We have $9 billion brands, Betty Crocker, Cheerios, Pillsbury, Blue Buffalo, Totino's, Yoplait. So there's so many of those brands that a lot of people know. So it's just a powerhouse when it comes to brands that are really here to make food the world loves, and that's the main reason. Like when I saw not only the power of the brands, but also the I think the at the heart or at the center of all these brands is really humans with a big heart that are driving growth of these brands. So to me, it has been an amazing journey so far in my 15 plus years there. But yeah, the question about multicultural market has been interesting. We've actually started this journey for a long time. I don't know, 15 years ago or more, we were already doing multicultural. And it has been an evolving journey. As you know, the market continues to shift, and we have needed to adapt to those shifts in the consumer behaviors, in the demographic changes that we're seeing in the country, and social changes, technology changes. So we have been adapting to those changes as we go. But I would say, in the last year and a half since I started in this role, one of the biggest shifts that I have helped shape, along with the team that I'm part of, is how do we go away from looking at multicultural as a communications angle, so a advertising communications thing, to a full on 4P commercial approach to
Mm.
everything that we do. For us, multicultural marketing is integral to marketing. It's not and it's a part of the whole approach, how we build brands at Mills. So that has been, I think, differential in how our brand teams and our brands have been, leveraging these tools that my team and I have been able to create and help them. as we continue to educate them on the trends, on the consumer behaviors, on the nuances, cultural nuances, which, as you know, it's a very complex market. When you start actually going deep into it, when you think about Hispanics, you think about one blanket approach. But if you lift the blanket underneath, there's a beautiful mix of cultural nuances that we need to, as companies and as brands, need to get really clear on in order to really build real, trustworthy, and meaningful relationships with these consumers.
That I love. I think this is one of the first times I've heard someone position the multicultural marketing more than just advertising, because I think that's what we're all used to. Like, and that's what we do from a research perspective. I am starting to see more, like you mentioned, on the commercial side, really integrating into the business. Can we dive a little bit deeper? Like, does that mean product and innovation and new SKUs, or how deep does General Mills think about that when we're talking about reaching multicultural consumers outside of just advertising
Yeah.
existing products?
Yeah, advertising media investment obviously is a big part of how we do business, how we talk to these consumers. But if you really want to do that well, before you get there, it starts with getting to really know the consumer. And at Mills, like, the consumer is at the center, at the heart of everything. So, it doesn't matter how much I love it, or, my boss loves it, or my team loves it, or our CEO loves it. If our consumer doesn't love it and doesn't buy it in the end, it's not it. We gotta keep working on it. So we spend a lot of time understanding and spending time talking to consumers to figure out what are the things, not only about our product, but also about their lifestyle, the
Mm.
challenges that they have in general with their life, even things like kitchen setup and like cooking utensils, like all of that. You got to understand like the life of this consumer, the things that they deal with every day, in order to figure out how your product lives within the context of their life. So we're not just selling a product, we're actually building a connection with them and hopefully solving a problem for them with the products that we have. So that's, in the end, it's beyond just selling an amazing tasting product. It's a product that fulfills a need and solves a problem. So to do that really well, you have to spend time understanding the consumer, figuring out what are the things that within their life you can, help solve the issue in. So that's like on the consumer side. And I would say that unlocks for us basically the rest of the work that needs to happen. And once you have that depth of the consumer issue, the understanding of their life situation, their issues that they're trying to solve, how then we get into understanding with our teams, then does the brand that we're in or the business that we're in, how can we solve that problem for them really well in a way that no other brand can do. And that unlocks a series of steps, right? That could be innovation driven, that could be what kind of products do we need to have, or maybe sizing, maybe it's a size issue, maybe we have boxes that are this tall and the pantries are not, they don't fit. So that's when you get to see things like, oh, we have a box of cereal that is this many ounces, and we notice that they're not putting the covers because it doesn't fit, so they have to empty into this thing, cover it up and put it away, that way they can put it in their covers. It's like, oh, maybe we should look at different package sizes, right? Like, that's where some of these ideas come up. But it's not something that a consumer will just tell you. You have to observe those things. So yes, so you could see that through innovation, package design. You could see that also through very simple things like in-store activations, just going to the in-store and seeing to the stores, the shelves, and just seeing, do I have the right product on the shelf? If I'm in LA, which that's where you are, right, Mario?
Yeah, yeah.
California. So if I'm in LA, which is a huge market for Hispanics, do I have the right assortment in the shelf for this audience? There are flavor profiles. There are types of products that are more geared to serve the need of that consumer than others. So that's like how we look at that. Like, are we looking at the right portfolio? How's our pricing strategy? How's our merchandising strategy? Are we in the right stores, the right shelving? So like all of that, it's like how we think about when we talk about commercializing the marketing. It happens there. It also happens in the ad and happens in the prints and the radio spots and all the things that we do, but it has to connect the dots. Otherwise, you hear it, you see it, but then you go to the store and it's just not closing, it's not connecting the dots for the consumer. And then you lose the sale, and it's not what we want.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you're pointing to, I feel like, what marketing has evolved to. Like, you're very aware of not only the demographics or cultural trends, but mentioning the kitchen and storage. Like, your knowledge is beyond advertising, right? It's starting into product. And obviously, it sounds like General Mills, and I know this, does a lot to connect with the consumer. You mentioning kind of qualitative research. So I'm wondering, in your day to day, a lot of our listeners are researchers and insights, and I think they would be interested. Like, how did, in your day to day or General Mills in general, you gave an example of some research of looking at the cabinet, for example. Is that something you're doing in person? Are you doing via cell phone? Tell us a little bit about, maybe getting into the nitty gritty about the type of research you use day to day to make those types of decisions. I'd be curious.
Yeah, I think to me, and I'm not in consumer research, so I'm not gonna go too deep into the methodologies here. But for me, the richest insights come from observation. That's what I've
Mm.
seen, and that, I mean, I used to be in research and development in Kimberly Clark back in the day when I was in R&D, and I was, doing research all the time. And I remember then, like even I worked on the team that was doing innovation for Mexico back then. We used to go to in homes like once every 2 months, all the time. We're always watching people using products and give us feedback. And to me, that's when I first learned the importance of behavior, like watching people behave, because there's this say do gap. A lot of times that you get a question on the phone, let's say, and they're like, yeah, this is what I love to eat, but then you go to the home and it's not necessarily exactly the case. And that's because sometimes we say what we want to do, but maybe it's not exactly what we do. As human beings, that's just how sometimes life is when things happen. So I think there's a lot of power in observation. So my point to researchers out there who are listening to this is, as much as possible, do ethnographies, because that's where you're going to uncover the richest level of insights. You're going to observe behaviors that the consumer will never tell you, because to them maybe it's just natural to do. It's just what they do, but for you maybe an aha, right? For you, it might be like, oh, interesting. I notice, I'm observing this. They're talking to me about this thing here, but I'm watching something over here. The way they are interacting with the family, or how they're eating the product. Maybe they're just cooking it very differently than our instructions on the package, right? So now that could open up doors for different messaging or partnership opportunities. So, like, there's just so much richness that comes out of there beyond just like how am I marketing my message, or how am I, going to connect to this consumer through my product, that allows you to just have a much more richer viewpoint of that consumer's life and behaviors. So to me, ethnographies are probably the number one way, but we have many ways that we do research too, and it's not just ethnographies. But I think to me, that's probably where you get the richest data.
Yeah, and that makes sense, especially with the type of food, I mean, or the type of products, right? Which is like generally food for General Mills. There's, like you mentioned, there's the product, and that's only one aspect. How they're interacting, how they're feeding their family, how they're cooking it, how they're storing it. And that's really difficult to capture in a survey or
Yeah.
or a focus group. So that's a really good point. And interestingly, we have seen, because there was such big shifts during the pandemic for everything from
Hmm.
technology to food, that there's this resurgence of qualitative research now. There's more and more
Yeah.
brands and companies are starting to do qualitative research because they need to get back to talking, meeting, interacting with their customers on that one to one.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I'll give you an example. I can speak now to it because it's executed and it's done. But we had a partnership with Tapatio, the sauce, from California, and Totino's, and it was actually part of an aha moment that the team had while watching ethnographies in California, in LA specifically. We went to talk about Totino's and the kids and the family eating it and how they cook it and how much how long does it take for them to finish eating it? Do they eat it watching TV or do just, however the moment is? And then we realized that every house we went had a tapatio sauce in the house. And it was very
Yeah.
present in the table or on the counter. It was just there. It was like part of the experience of eating. That unlocked the team to figure out, like, hey, what if we combined Tapatio and Totino's and did some partnership where people can actually dip their Totino in their Tapatio sauce because they're already adding it to a lot of things. Can they
Yeah.
add it to our products now and enhance their experience? So now you're thinking about, how do I not only solve a problem, in this case, hungry teens after school, which is one of the occasions that Totino's plays in, but now you're enhancing their experience by adding something that they already have and love in their household, which is this hot sauce. So that's one example. Another one was an example that I'll give you where the ethnographers can help. It's we had no you had heard, or you hear through research, secondary research or whatever, that the penetration of oh my god, what am I thinking about, the electric ovens? Oh my gosh,
Air
now I forgot.
fryers.
Yes, air fryers. Thank you. Penetration of air fryers is out the roof. It's really high. Everybody has one. We should be talking about, making our products in air fryers to make people's lives easier, which makes a lot of sense. When you think
Yeah.
about it that way, you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Then you go to a family's house in LA and you see that they do have an air fryer. Yes, penetration is there. They have it, but they're not using it. Why? They don't have the counter space to host this machine, this huge appliance on the counter, which is limited already. Now they have, the blender, the toaster, probably the more priority things. And then now they have this thing that they keep somewhere else in another room that they only use for special occasions. So now you're like, oh my gosh, like I did not realize space could be a problem for people to use this appliance that, even though they have it, it's just not something they use. So that's like an idea that you're like, oh wow, I didn't think of it, right? So that's just how ethnographies can help you really connect the dot between what you believe to be true, or what is actually factually true, and what is happening behaviorally. So you might have something in the house. Yes, the data may show the penetration is up for air fryers, but are they actually using it? And that's where you see a lot of, discrepancies in the data.
I love that. I love your Tostinos and Tapatio story. That's like, it's so true.
Yeah.
Tapatio is just everywhere here in LA. I mean, that's just
Yeah. I
a
was impressed. I
brand.
mean, I had heard that it was a brand that it was, everywhere. And then every time I went to the ethnographies too with the Totino's team, and it was in every house I went. I saw it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like a staple. And it's funny, it's making its way, like obviously Mexican restaurants, but now you see Tapatio now here in LA, like at Asian restaurants, which I love to see, like that
Yeah.
cross cultural pollination, you know?
I love that. Yeah, I saw that last time I was there too, and they were doing a lot of innovation too with and then like exploring, even brand expansions. I saw it on I think ramen soup or something,
Yeah.
branded
Yeah.
or co-branded, and a few other expansions. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I get talking a little bit about trends. So, I mean, backing up a little bit outside of maybe General Mills or inside of General Mills, you as a marketer, as a thought leader, what are some trends that you're seeing in our industry? Like, for example, something that I feel like came and went was total market. It was like this big thing 5 years ago, and everyone was doing it. There was a backlash. Now it's kind of gone away. Like, what are some things maybe in multicultural marketing or marketing in general? Some trends that you see um, in the pipeline, or maybe that you're seeing in your work at General Mills?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, specifically with multicultural, I'll speak to that, but I think more broadly, of course, AI, right, has been one
Mm,
topic that a lot of marketers are paying attention to, and how that will enable us to do our job better, or how it's going to hinder in many ways, some things. So there's some challenges with AI, but it's obviously some great things with it. So that I would say that at a macro level, that's one trend that you see in the industry a lot of interest on. I think if you double click on multicultural specifically, there are a couple things that I see industry wide as I talk to my peers across other companies, and how they're approaching this, maybe slightly different from before. I think the one of the biggest trends, and it's not necessarily anything groundbreaking, but I think it has been an aha for many companies, and that has been our ability to really segment the Hispanic population in the US appropriately. I think in the past it used to be acculturated and unacculturated, and that was it, or Spanish speaker, non Spanish speaker, and or English speaker, non-English speaker. And now I think there are so many more tools and partners out there who are spending a lot of money investing in tools that allow us to have a lot richer data that allows us to really connect with this consumer at a more at a deeper level, besides just like, do you speak Spanish or not, or have you lived in this country, more than 10 years or not. I think segmentation is one where I see a lot of companies spending time and money investing in, to ensure that whatever plans and communications are put out there are going to connect appropriately with the consumer, and the messages are reaching the right audience, because you want to have broad reach, but you also want to reach the right people. And if you don't have a good segmentation strategy that's based on, your investment is not gonna pay off. So I'd say that's number one. It's segmentation and spending the appropriate, bringing the appropriate partners to help you do that. The second one, I would say, trend has been, I think, this back to basics approach. Like, multicultural marketing, it's marketing. It's not
mm,
a thing that is like so foreign that we have to figure out. And yeah, we have to figure out how to do it with this audience. But the principles of multicultural marketing are just the same principles as marketing, right? And I think I see a lot of companies, a lot of my peers out there. I have a couple of peers that we meet every other month to just share best practices and learn from each other. And that's one thing that I hear a lot talking about, is like foundational things, like getting back to the basics of marketing. Is what I told you earlier about the 4 Ps. It's about research, getting back into people's homes now that COVID is out of the door, hopefully forever. Getting back into the consumers, faces, and developing those relationships with them, getting to see how they live, their family, their experience, their home. I think the foundational things, that the base, not basics, but the foundational work that has informed really good marketing ideas, for at least for General Mills for the last 150 years. It's really getting back to that with this new consumer now at the heart of it, versus having a more broad approach that is like everybody feels the same way. It's like, no, now we have different needs, different relationships with categories. So we got to understand some of that. So it's kind of going back to those foundational principles that we know work really well. I'd say those are
that-
probably the two main ones that I have
I love
seen.
that. Yeah, I'm feeling that as well. Like this foundational, back to basics approach that you mentioned. Like, I think our industry, we're feeling like we're, yeah, that it's just marketing at the end of the day. It's not multicultural marketing, and we may have expertise with certain groups, but at the
Right.
end of the day, from a research perspective, we're bringing to bear all those methodologies that other researchers that don't focus on multicultural, right? And so, that's good to hear that you're seeing that as well. And
Yeah.
as a researcher, I'm particularly interested about the segmentation. I see that as well. I'm working actually with the Insights Association on the Idea Council on coming out with a guidebook for
Oh,
researchers regarding multicultural. And I'm gonna ask you. I'm two birds with one stone. Like one thing we're tackling is acculturation.
Yes.
Um, so here's my hot take is like I feel like that's an outdated segmentation. I and I'll qualify by saying it. Every company has their own algorithms, but they typically consist of some of the things you mentioned: language usage, media language usage, years in the U.S., um, affinity to home culture. Right. I think
Yep.
those four questions or pillars are extremely important. The thing I question though is just the idea of acculturation, like, and because the acculturation assumes this linear progression towards American or whatever that definition is, right? And so I
Mhm.
don't know. What's your take on acculturation? Is it something we should be using? Is there something? Is it a terminology thing? Should we be calling it something else? This
Yeah.
is a left field question, but I'm taking advantage of talking to you right
No,
now.
I love that question because it's one that a lot of us debate out there, right? As we think about connecting with this consumer and getting to understand the from a segmentation standpoint. I honestly think it's more of a changing language that we need to adapt. The way that we
Yeah.
talk a lot about it is cultural mindset, not necessarily
Mm,
acculturation level, because you might be here. Because I agree with you, acculturation levels assumes a linear approach. So if I came to this country last year, I'm this much acculturated. If I've been here 20 years, I'm all the way here now, and that's not what we know is that that's not true for some consumers. They may be born here, but they feel so connected to their heritage, um, that it's their cultural level might be here. So it's not a time in country that determines that. It's a personal heritage cultural mindset that that person
mm,
develops. And in some places, you have people that are deeper with that or some that are less, and that's okay. Everybody's in their own journey and pendulum there. So to me, it's more of how we change the language around it, because I do think that's still relevant, because that is important to consider as you think about what is the heritage cultural mindset that they have. Are they more, they're 50-50? Do they feel more like they want to be part of both worlds? Or do they live here, work here, or study here, but they actually feel and behave more like somebody who is from their home country more. At home, for example, the way that they cook and they eat and the way that they do the rituals represent more of that heritage more than the U.S. heritage or the U.S. culture. So I think that's an important point that I don't think should be lost in this segmentation work. I think that is important. I think it's just more how we talk about it, and that it's not a linear, time bound approach. It's more of a personal decision and preference, right? The other way that we think about it too is from a value system standpoint, right? Because
mm.
values may evolve and change depending on your family history of, how, when and how you came into this country. Maybe you're like, I'm an immigrant. I came when I was 17. I think you were born here, right, Mario?
Yeah, I was born here,
Yeah.
but
So you're
Spanish
first
was my
generation.
first language, so it's like
Yeah. So
yeah,
yeah, first generation, third generation, like you have generations of people who are here, but they consider themselves Hispanic, and some people who have been here 10 years, and they're like, no, yo soy americano, yo soy gringo,
yeah,
and that's okay. And the values may change a little bit. So you see people still who I'm one of those. I love eating at home. Like I like cooking at home. Growing up in the DR, we didn't have the access or honestly the money to eat out all the time. So eating at home was not only considered better financially, but healthier too. So I like love eating at home and cooking at home. So I still, even though I have so many options to eat out, I still prefer to make meals at home and like make my kids snacks at home. Totino's after school. He loves Annie's mac and cheese. Like that's his favorite thing. Or Progresso soup after school. Like I prefer to do that than like stop at a fast food restaurant on the way from school, right? Because
yeah,
it's just how I grew up, and those are the values that I have as I want to give my son, my time with him. So in that case, like my value system didn't change, but I know many people who come here and they're pressed for time or for whatever reason, this just like, you know what? My value system was that, but here I'm gonna adapt a new value system because now that's better for the lifestyle that I have. So you kind of have those things that fluctuate based on your decision and your situation and your current life, your current life situation, really, that dictate how those values may or may not shift. And that's another way that I think when you think about segmentation, and I'm really curious about the work that you're doing because I would love to hear more about it too.
Yeah.
If you want to share now, I would love to, have a follow up convo with you because that is one area for me, segmentation, that I think as an industry we can do a lot more work in, because this is a very diverse, complex, and nuanced consumer that I think that there's not a one way or a right or wrong way. I think there's an evolving, ever evolving way that we just need to continue to inform our segmentation work to ensure that we're appropriately representing this consumer in our work so that the output of our work is very tightly connecting with their value system.
Yeah, so I love that. And I might steal your cultural mindset title because I think that's, as I was thinking about it, that's what that I landed there too, that all the components that we use for acculturation are valuable. It's acculturation is just the wrong word.
I agree.
Um,
And I
and
would say
because
it's
it
not my
changes.
term. I didn't make it up. I'll give credit to the partner that we work with from a segmentation standpoint, who is their model. So
Oh,
it's
okay. So I might not be able to take that, but I, I love the, I love the idea of the cultural components of it, and then the values work for sure. We actually did an in-depth study on values to get at
mm,
exactly what you said. Not only among Latinos, but among Asian Americans, Black Americans, we want to understand: are there, how do values and cultural markers intersect generationally? It was really interesting, and some of the work that has been most illuminating when it comes to values is the work that we did with AARP. I can share this because they publish a lot of it, but like working with AARP, I realized how we deal with aging, I think is one
mm,
of the most telling things about a culture. Like,
mm.
like how we deal with aging parents or family members, and
Yeah.
seeing the cultural differences in that is super interesting, and that's tied to this idea of values, right?
Hmm.
And it changes among first, second, third generation. We did
Yeah.
work among specifically Latinos, but um, and it was great to see AARP take the time to learn what those differences are, and how, like, so my generation, for example, like I'm a barely a millennial. I'm like an elder millennial, right? Um, and how we're dealing with like aging parents and kids at the same time, and
Yeah.
how the culture intersects is really,
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah, which I mean, you do see a tendency with Hispanic households of multi-generational households, right?
Right.
So a lot of our Hispanic homes have parents, the parents, the kids, and then the grandkids living in it. In that, that is something that it's just part of the reality of life out there. But it's also interesting to your point, like you have this generation that is in between these two generations, really taking care of
Yeah.
one aging, one coming up, and how do you balance all of that? And then you have, a value system that may differ from yours on both ends too, because
Yeah.
the value system of my son who's 16, I'll tell you, is very different than mine in many ways. I think
Yeah.
the core values are the same, but like there are some values that I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is not, how I grew up.
Where did
I'll
you
tell you
get
an
that
example
from?
really. Where? Well, I think it's cultural. Like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
speak it up. I know. Back home, like we were not allowed to bring kids, anybody, into our bedrooms. Like just bedrooms are sacred. Like no one goes into the bedroom, right? Now these kids are like a friend over, they go to the room, and I'm like, wait, where are you going? Why are you going to the room? Like what for? It's like, mom,
Yeah.
like that's where we hang out. I was like, says who? It's like, says everyone. I was like, okay, that's definitely a cultural value that I don't
Yeah.
share. That is, that my this generation has. And then the same with my mom. Like there are things that viewpoints that she has that are different than mine because maybe mine has evolved now. So it's very interesting when you think about those dynamics and how complex the life of Hispanics in this country are when they're dealing with so much of that.
For
So
sure. And so I mean, I think this is, believe it or not, we're almost at our time. I'm glad I asked the acculturation question. That was a great insights there. What are you already touched a little bit on some trends that you see, like multicultural marketing just being seen more as marketing. Like what do you see personally as the future of multicultural marketing? Um, yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. What do you see in the future? Are there any trends that you're seeing that might be coming to fruition or are there down the line?
I think that I see, and I hope to see more of this too. I see brands being very intentional with their messaging and very culturally aware of how their messaging connects with that consumer. So for me, it's like we have an untapped opportunity, I think, with 62 million US Hispanics in this country, almost 20% of the population. And I feel if you look at the numbers, and there's a lot of polls around this, a lot of them don't see themselves reflected in brand messaging, visually, message wise, sound wise. Like, it's just not represented well. The culture is not there, so a lot of them feel not represented. So that to me is one that I'm expecting to see, and I'm already seeing a lot of companies making strides towards embracing this power consumer as the growth potential for these companies, right? So I think consumers, Hispanic consumers, are going to start seeing their values, themselves, their culture more reflected in brand messages out there. So that's one. And that also comes with, like, if you look out, if you go to a grocery store now, and even outside of the grocery store, but that's the world I live in, you see a lot more innovation that is happening from like Hispanics influencing flavor profiles across the board. You see it, in many categories, but you see guava popping up here, and you got coconut everywhere, and like all the things that, horchata, even I see
I
in
love
many
seeing the
places.
I love seeing all the churro flavors.
Churro, yes,
Yeah,
cinnamon, canela. Like there's a lot of like influential profiles that the Hispanic consumer is seeing. So I think is providing to these brands. So I think that is one that I'm really excited about. It's like finally seeing these companies, and General Mills is one of them. Like, we're making such intentional actions around providing solutions that this consumer not only says, "Oh, that's great, it fits my need," but it's that was made for me, with me in mind, my personal situation in mind. That's how we want every interaction to feel. So that's one that I'm really excited about, as it goes into the future. And I think this other one, the other one, it's more broad, but it's like the influence that this cohort of consumers has in the rest of the country. If you think about Messi with soccer, right? Bad Bunny with music, Peso Pluma, also in a different genre, but within music. We have so many, and that's only a couple of many, many, many others. We have so many influential, kind of people, that are gonna help elevate the cultural aspects of Hispanics, and allow companies to really, be able to resonate different with this consumer. So I'm excited about that, just to kind of see also the country adapt more culture in general. We see the infusions also happening from Asian populations and Black populations. Like, the US is becoming so culturally nuanced across the board. I'm just speaking from a Hispanic standpoint today, but you see it across the board. I mean, I'm sure you see it, Mario, from your research too. It's the influences of Asian culture everywhere. K-pop, for example, like amazing, right? We just launched some cereals with them on the box. Like, beautiful execution of connecting through culture. The Black population has been influencing a lot of this country, from arts to music, to a lot of things, movies, for a long time. And then now I think it's like Hispanics are like the new influencing factor, the newer, I would
yeah.
say. I think with food, we've been doing it a little bit longer through some of those flavors, but now you see even a lot more, niche kind of Hispanic flavors showing up out there. So I think that's one that I'm really excited about, to see how the culture continues to evolve of the whole country, and people just continue to adapt and incorporate these beautiful cultural things into their life and enriching their own lives that way. I see also a ton of like my friends putting their kids who are Caucasian in like immersion programs, Chinese immersion program, Spanish immersion program, French immersion program, Portuguese immersion programs, and I think that's beautiful. I think that just speaks
Yeah.
to the fact that it's not just Hispanics that want diversity. It's not just Blacks that want diversity or Asians that want diversity. Everyone wants to live in a world that allows them to enjoy the world that they live in, right? You don't want to live in a little silo. We live in a blended community, and I think I love to see that too. So I don't know. That was a
No,
long-winded approach
no,
to that answer.
I love that. I love that because it's so optimistic and there's a lot of negative stuff out there, but when we think about food and cultural influences, diversity, it's beautiful. And you're right. It's so cool. I mean, even within my lifetime, seeing, like you mentioned, I was born here. These flavors that only existed in my household or specialty grocery stores now becoming mainstream is
Yeah.
amazing. I feel seen, but I think what's equally feels good to me is seeing my friends that are not Latino enjoy
Hmm.
it, right? Like
Yes.
that's so cool. Like
Yes.
flavors that that maybe you were embarrassed when you took certain foods to school, but now it's just mainstream and
Yeah.
everyone enjoys is really nice to see.
Yeah, and I think that's that. I would say the last thing you said something that sparked this thought, and it's been a reality for my life and personally, but also what I see out there. The new generation of young Latinos that I see are for like way deeper connecting to the culture in a way that maybe others weren't. I'll tell you, my son is 16. He asks me every day. In the past, he used to be like, no, no, no Spanish, no, 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 no. And now, like since he turned 14, he's like, I only want to speak Spanish, mom. And I think there is this like generation that is coming up with such pride in who they
Right.
are, in their identity, their culture, the food, the music. He asked me the other day, like, can you teach me how to dance salsa and merengue? I'm like, yes.
That's amazing.
um, so it's like I think that's another thing that we're starting to see is the new generations, which by the way, I think is 25% of the youth in this country is Latino today,
Yeah.
which is huge, right? And continues to increase, right? Um, so the youth of this country will shape the future of this country. Those are the future leaders of this country, right? And if they are so if they're embracing the culture in such a deep way and proud of it, and non-apologetic, there used to be a time where like hiding your accent was the thing that you needed to do. That's no longer the thing that people want to do or need to
Right.
do, and I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful celebration of authenticity and accepting people for who they are and how they show up. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. We got to schedule another one. I think we
I
could have
know this was so
talked
fun. It went
about.
by so fast, Mario.
Yeah, I loved it. If and thank you everybody for listening. I'm sure there's going to be people that want to connect with you and just chat with you. What's the best way to reach you online if people want to
I
find
think LinkedIn is
connect?
the probably the best way.
Okay,
Gloria Alcántara on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to connect and continue to expand my network that way. This was awesome.
awesome.
Thank you so much, Mario, for the opportunity to share some of my experiences with the audience, and hopefully there's a nugget or two in here that people can take back with them, and hopefully change the way they think about this work.
Yeah, definitely. There was lots of nuggets, and thank you again, Glory, and thank you everybody for listening.
Thanks.
Thanks to everyone listening in. To get more multicultural insights, check us out at thinknow.com and follow us on social media. You can also subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform.